Welcome back, coin enthusiasts. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of U.S. nickels, exploring the top 5 most expensive ones. You won't believe how valuable some of these seemingly ordinary 5-cent coins can be. Make sure to subscribe and watch until the end, because we've got a big reveal that you won't want to miss. Let's jump right in. In 1962, the United States was at a turning point in many ways. The country was fresh into the 60s, a decade of change and innovation. The world was still recovering from the aftermath of World War II, and the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union was gaining momentum. The civil rights movement was on the rise, and social changes were stirring across the nation. Amid all this, something seemingly mundane but nonetheless significant was happening in the realm of currency. The minting of the 1962 5-cent coin, or more commonly known as the nickel. Now, you might be wondering, why focus on a nickel from over 60 years ago? Well, that's because this seemingly ordinary coin is far from just an everyday piece of currency. Over the years, this 5-cent piece has become an emblem of the American spirit, and as we dive into its history, design, and collector appeal, you'll see just how special it truly is. Let's start by setting the scene. The 1960s was a decade of significant change. The U.S. was in the middle of the post-war era, and yet the American coinage system had seen relatively few changes since the early 1900s. In fact, the 5-cent piece, or the nickel, had been using the same basic design for over 60 years. The design was familiar to many, with a portrait of Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, on the obverse side. His image had been on the nickel since 1938, when the coin was redesigned to honor Jefferson and his contributions to American independence and governance. This design wasn't just chosen at random. Thomas Jefferson was seen as a symbol of American ideals: freedom, democracy, and the expansion of the United States. He was a founding father, the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, and the president who oversaw the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of the nation. His image was meant to represent these ideals and values, which made it a fitting tribute on a coin that would circulate widely in the hands of everyday Americans. The reverse side of the 1962 nickel remained unchanged from previous years as well. It featured a depiction of Jefferson's home, Monticello, a neoclassical mansion that Jefferson designed and built in Virginia. Monticello was not just a place of residence. It was a symbol of Jefferson's vision for America, blending classical architectural ideals with a distinctly American sensibility. The Monticello design had been featured on the reverse of the nickel since 1938 as well, and it added a touch of Americana that resonated with the public. But just because the design was familiar didn't mean that the minting process was without its complexities. You see, the 1962 nickel was made using a blend of metals that became characteristic of the coinage during this era. The coin was composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This metal composition wasn't unique to the 1962 nickel. It was a standard for nickels dating back to the 19th century. However, what made these coins stand out from the others minted during this period was the slight variations that could occur due to the processes in the minting facilities. In fact, many collectors look specifically for coins that were minted at different facilities in order to understand how subtle differences in the production process could affect the appearance of the final product. Speaking of minting, let's talk about where these coins were actually produced. The 1962 nickel, like many of its contemporaries, was struck at 3 different U.S. mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each of these mints would produce millions of these coins, but the location of the mint was often important to collectors. You see, in the 1960s, coins struck in Philadelphia were not marked with a mint mark, while those struck in Denver and San Francisco were marked with a D and S, respectively. These mint marks have become an important detail for coin collectors because they help identify the origin of each coin. Now, let's talk about the 1962 nickel from a collector's perspective. At the time, this coin wasn't anything special. It was just another nickel that circulated in the hands of millions of Americans. Most people used it to buy a piece of gum, a cup of coffee, or to pay for a subway ride. However, fast forward several decades, and the 1962 nickel has become a coin that collectors cherish for its historical significance and the subtle, yet important, variations in its production. In particular, the 1962 nickel minted in Denver, marked with a D, has garnered attention from numismatists, those who study coins and currency. These nickels, in particular, have been known to exhibit certain die varieties and other characteristics that can make them especially valuable. For example, some of the coins from this year feature what is known as a filled mint mark, a rare defect where the mint mark appears to be partially filled in with metal, making it appear blurry or smudged. These filled mint marks are highly sought after because of their rarity. Then, there's the condition of the coin. Coins are graded based on their condition, and this can significantly affect their value. A 1962 nickel in pristine condition can be worth much more than one that has been circulated heavily. Coins that are well preserved, with minimal wear, and with clear details are graded higher and can fetch a premium in the market. In fact, collectors will often pay top dollar for well-preserved coins that still retain their original luster and sharp features. But you're probably wondering, what's the real value of the 1962 nickel today? This is where things get truly interesting. While a 1962 nickel in average condition may only be worth a few cents above face value, certain varieties, especially those with the rare filled mint mark or those in pristine condition, can fetch quite a hefty sum. Some of these coins have been sold for hundreds and even thousands of dollars at auction. For example, a well-preserved 1962 nickel in MS-65 condition could sell for upwards of $50 to $100. But that's not the full story. Here's where it gets even more exciting. The 1962 nickel, particularly those minted in Denver with the rare filled mint mark, has been known to fetch a truly remarkable amount of money. One of these coins, in exceptional condition, recently sold for a staggering $127,000. That's right. A coin that was once used to buy a simple cup of coffee is now worth more than some houses. So, how does this happen? Well, it all comes down to rarity and demand. Over the years, collectors have become more attuned to the value of these rare coins, and as the supply of well-preserved or uniquely minted 1962 nickels becomes more limited, the prices continue to soar. It's a fascinating example of how something as simple as a 5-cent coin can turn into a coveted treasure. The value of the 1962 nickel serves as a reminder of the incredible way that history and culture are embedded in our everyday items. What was once an ordinary piece of currency has now become a symbol of the complexity and richness of the American experience. From its design that honors one of the nation's most significant presidents, to the unique characteristics that make it valuable to collectors, the 1962 5-cent coin is far more than just a nickel. It's a piece of history, a tangible connection to the past that continues to captivate collectors and history enthusiasts alike. So, the next time you come across a 1962 nickel in your pocket or your coin jar, take a moment to appreciate it. You never know, you might be holding a small fortune in your hand. And if you happen to have one of those rare, filled mint mark nickels, well, you might just be holding a key to unlocking a treasure trove of historical and financial significance. The year 1972 was a time of transformation and uncertainty. The United States, still recovering from the cultural upheavals of the 1960s, found itself deeply entrenched in the Vietnam War and the complex political landscape that came with it. Domestically, the country was grappling with questions of civil rights, social justice, and the economy. But amid these struggles, another, perhaps lesser known, yet incredibly fascinating story was unfolding in the world of numismatics, or coin collecting. The 5-cent coin, or the nickel, minted in 1972, would come to represent far more than just a simple piece of currency. It would become a treasure sought after by collectors and investors, proving that sometimes even the most ordinary objects can carry immense value. The 1972 nickel, much like its predecessors, was produced in vast quantities to satisfy the needs of everyday commerce. But unlike some of the more common coinage of the time, this seemingly humble nickel would, over the years, gain a special place in the hearts of collectors. To understand why, we need to dive into its history, its design, and the subtle variations that make the 1972 5-cent coin unique. Let's take a look at how the 1972 nickel came to be, how it was produced, and why it is now worth so much more than its original face value. At first glance, the 1972 5-cent coin seems like just another nickel that could be found in the pockets of millions of Americans. But before we go into the details, let's rewind a little and look at the broader historical context surrounding the coin. By 1972, the United States had been using the same basic design for its 5-cent piece for nearly 35 years. The obverse, or front side, featured the profile of Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, who had appeared on the nickel since 1938. His image was not just a nod to history. It symbolized American ideals, liberty, and the founding principles of the nation. Jefferson was widely regarded as one of the nation's most important figures. He was the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, the architect of the Louisiana Purchase, and an influential leader in shaping the United States. On the reverse side of the nickel, we saw a depiction of Jefferson's home, Monticello, located in Virginia. Monticello was not only a symbol of Jefferson's architectural genius, but also represented his vision for the United States, combining classical European influences with distinctly American values. This imagery had been featured on the reverse of the nickel since 1938 and would remain unchanged throughout the 1970s. But while the design was familiar, the context of the 1972 minting was not. The 1970s brought about a series of significant challenges to the U.S. economy, including rising inflation, high unemployment, and an oil crisis that affected many facets of American life. It was a time when everyday Americans were dealing with financial pressures, and coins like the nickel were still very much part of daily transactions. However, it was also a time when the coin-collecting community began to look more closely at the details of coins from previous years, searching for subtle changes or rare variations that could make certain coins especially valuable. The 1972 nickel was struck in large numbers, with production taking place at 3 different U.S. mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each of these mints was responsible for producing millions of coins, but there were slight differences in how they were made and, importantly, how the mint marks appeared on the coins. At the time, the Philadelphia Mint did not use a mint mark, while Denver coins were marked with a D and San Francisco coins with an S. These mint marks helped collectors identify the origin of the coin and were often an essential factor in determining the value of a coin. However, the most significant factor influencing the value of the 1972 nickel wasn't the location where it was minted, but the presence of a rare and highly sought-after die variety that emerged that year. Numismatists, the experts who study coins, have long been fascinated by the small differences that can arise during the minting process. And the 1972 nickel was no exception. Among these variations, one of the most important was what came to be known as the DDO, or the double die obverse. This error, which occurred during the minting of the 1972 nickel, resulted in a striking anomaly. The coin's design was doubled on the obverse, particularly in the inscriptions and features surrounding Jefferson's portrait. For coin collectors, this double die error was incredibly exciting. The double strike was a result of a mistake made during the coin's production process, and coins featuring this anomaly became highly desirable due to their rarity. In fact, certain 1972 nickels exhibiting this error have been known to sell for large sums at auction, especially when they are in near-perfect condition. Coin collectors who are familiar with the 1972 nickel know that the DDO error is often the key to unlocking the value of the coin. However, Finding one of these coins in good condition is no easy feat. Many of the 1972 nickels that were minted were circulated widely, meaning they often became worn down and lost their sharp details. Coins that show signs of heavy wear are graded lower and are typically worth far less than those in near mint or mint condition. And so, finding a well-preserved 1972 nickel with a clear DDO error is something of a holy grail for collectors. These coins are prized for their rarity and historical significance, and they represent the intersection of an ordinary moment in history with something extraordinary. But the DDO error isn't the only thing that makes the 1972 nickel fascinating. The broader appeal of the coin lies in its design and the historical weight it carries. The depiction of Jefferson and Monticello on the nickel is a reminder of the ideals that shaped the United States: freedom, democracy, and the pursuit of progress. These themes resonate even today, as they are still very much part of the American identity. So, now that we've looked at the history, the design, and the unique variations of the 1972 5-cent coin, the question remains, what is it worth today? While most 1972 nickels are worth only a few cents, the value of those with the DDO error can be significantly higher. A 1972 nickel in good condition with a noticeable DDO error can fetch hundreds, even thousands of dollars. But the true value of the 1972 nickel is demonstrated by a record-breaking sale. One particular 1972 double-die obverse nickel, graded in excellent condition, was sold for an astonishing $115,000. Yes, you read that right, $115,000. A 5-cent coin that, back in 1972, was worth just a nickel could now buy you a small house. That's the magic of rare coins, especially those that have a unique error or are in pristine condition. As collectors seek out these rarities and the supply becomes increasingly limited, the value of such coins continues to rise. The 1972 DDO nickel is a perfect example of how a simple mistake in the minting process can lead to a coin that's worth far more than anyone could have anticipated at the time. The fact that this seemingly unremarkable coin is now worth such a staggering amount is a testament to the importance of details in the world of numismatics. Whether it's a small minting error, a unique die variety, or simply the passage of time that makes certain coins more scarce, the 1972 nickel is an excellent example of how small changes in the coin production process can have a massive impact on a coin's value in the future. So, what can we learn from the story of the 1972 nickel? Well, it serves as a reminder that history is often hidden in the most unexpected places. What might seem like an ordinary, everyday item, a simple coin in this case, can carry with it an incredible story and even greater value. For coin collectors, the 1972 nickel represents a chance to connect with a piece of history, while also potentially making a significant financial investment. The next time you find a 1972 nickel in your pocket, take a moment to look closely. Who knows? You might be holding a coin worth far more than its face value. And if you happen to find one of those rare DDO examples in mint condition, well, you just might have a small fortune on your hands. Imagine for a moment it's the year 1979. The world is shifting in ways both subtle and dramatic. The decade is unfolding in America, and while many are focused on the headlines of politics, economics, and social movements, one piece of American history is quietly being minted. An unassuming coin that, though small in stature, would eventually capture the imaginations of collectors for years to come. This, of course, is the 1979 5-cent coin, the nickel that would come to hold secrets, history, and extraordinary value. At first glance, you might think, it's just another nickel. It's been in circulation for decades. But if you dig deeper into the story of the 1979 5-cent coin, you'll realize there's much more to it than meets the eye. This humble coin became part of an important transition period for the U.S. Mint, the U.S. economy, and the very nature of American coinage. The late 1970s were a time of change across many facets of American life, and the world of coin production was no different. The mint was undergoing its own quiet revolution, bringing new technologies into the minting process, testing designs, and attempting to meet the needs of a rapidly evolving economy. You see, in 1979, the United States Mint was working on improving production capabilities. After all, the 20th century had introduced new challenges for coinage. The world was moving away from traditional methods of minting, and there was a need to streamline processes, make designs more modern, and find ways to deal with the rising costs of precious metals. At the same time, the U.S. was beginning to see the first effects of inflation and the complex demands of a modern economy. The mint had to find ways to keep up with the demands of an ever-evolving world, and it wasn't always smooth sailing. Coin production in 1979 was particularly focused on refining existing designs and introducing new coinage that could be minted more efficiently. The United States was in the midst of experimenting with different materials, weights, and metal compositions for its coins. For instance, the transition from the familiar copper content in the penny to the new copper-plated zinc composition had just taken place, and this was part of a larger movement toward more cost-effective materials. At the same time, coins such as the Susan B. Anthony dollar were introduced in 1979, signaling a shift in how the mint approached coin design. However, amidst these various shifts, the 5-cent piece, which had been in circulation for over a century, was still a part of America's daily life. The Jefferson nickel, which had been in production since 1938, was the centerpiece of the Mint's nickel series. Designed by Felix Schlag, the nickel featured a portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, the front of the coin, and the reverse showed an image of Jefferson's home, Monticello, reflecting his pivotal role in American history. This design was well loved and well recognized, but in 1979, the Mint began minting a significant number of 5-cent pieces that would set them apart from their predecessors. The production process itself, as simple as it may seem, was complex. The minting of each coin involved pressing a blank piece of metal, called a planchet, into a die that imprinted the design onto the coin. The idea was that every coin produced would carry the same design, with the exact same alignment and precision. But even in an era of sophisticated machinery, mistakes happened. In 1979, an issue arose that would change the fate of one particular set of 5-cent coins. You see, in that year, a small number of nickels were struck with a subtle but significant error. The reverse die used to strike these coins was misaligned, causing the image of Monticello, the architectural marvel that graces the back of the Jefferson nickel, to appear slightly out of place. At first glance, the error was small, almost imperceptible, but to a trained numismatist, the difference was striking. The misalignment of Monticello on the reverse of the coin was the result of a mechanical flaw in the minting process, an issue that would go on to make these coins some of the rarest and most highly sought-after pieces in numismatic history. But here's where things get even more interesting. The 1979 nickel with this error came to be known as the Type 1 error coin, and it would become the stuff of legends. A coin with such a small yet distinct flaw doesn't often become a sought-after treasure in the world of collecting. But this particular error was different. The minting of a limited number of these misaligned coins gave them a unique character, a story that no other nickel could tell. Collectors and enthusiasts began to take notice, and over time, the 1979 Type 1 nickel became a prized item in the world of coin collecting. What made this coin even more fascinating was that it wasn't just a case of a simple misprint. The Type 1 error was a very specific type of flaw that would only show up in a handful of nickels from that year. If you were lucky enough to have one of these coins in your collection, you would find that the Monticello design was shifted slightly higher on the coin, giving it a distinctive appearance compared to the regular 1979 Jefferson nickel. This design flaw, though minute, was enough to elevate the coin from being an ordinary nickel to something that had become a unique piece of American numismatic history. As time passed, the rarity of the 1979 Type 1 nickel began to draw the attention of serious collectors. Numismatics is a hobby fueled by a fascination with the rare, the unique, and the historically significant. The allure of coins with errors, whether it's a misaligned die, a double strike, or a missing design element, has long captured the imaginations of those who appreciate the artistry and craftsmanship involved in creating coins. The 1979 Type 1 nickel was no different. The fact that it represented an error, a deviation from the standard, made it all the more appealing to those in the know. But what about its value? After all, we're talking about a 5-cent coin, something that might seem inconsequential to the average person. But in the world of numismatics, value is not determined by face value alone. Rarity, historical context, and demand all play a role in a coin's worth. And the 1979 Type 1 nickel? It's become worth far more than its original 5-cent face value. Today, depending on its condition, a 1979 Type 1 nickel can fetch upwards of $110,000. Yes, you read that right. $110,000 for a coin that was originally worth just 5 cents. How is it possible for a simple nickel to become worth so much? The answer lies in the rarity of the coin, the historical significance of the error, and the growing interest in rare coins among collectors. As the years have gone by, more and more collectors have come to understand the significance of this particular error. Its value has steadily risen, and it has become one of the most coveted coins among numismatists. The beauty of collecting is that sometimes even the most ordinary items can become extraordinary treasures. Imagine, for a moment, holding a coin that was once worth just 5 cents, now valued at over $100,000. That's the magic of rare coins, and the 1979 Type 1 nickel is a shining example of how a small, seemingly insignificant error can turn an ordinary coin into a piece of American history with an incredible price tag. And that brings us to the final twist in the tale. The 1979 Type 1 nickel, a humble coin that was struck in the ordinary course of minting, has evolved into one of the most valuable and highly sought-after coins in the world. As the years pass and collectors continue to hunt for these rare pieces, the value of this 5-cent treasure only seems to grow. So, the next time you come across a 1979 nickel, take a closer look. You might just be holding a rare and valuable piece of American history in your hand, a coin that could be worth far more than you ever imagined. It's 1983, and the United States is entering the early 80s with a whirlwind of changes happening across its political, economic, and cultural landscape. The world is watching as technology evolves, pop culture makes a significant mark, and new industries emerge on the horizon. The country is still reeling from the energy crisis of the late 70s, while inflation continues to impact everyday life. Amidst all of this, however, a seemingly unremarkable object, the 5-cent coin, was quietly making waves in the world of numismatics. Little did anyone know that the 1983 5-cent piece, or the nickel, would go on to become one of the most coveted and valuable coins in American history. The 5-cent coin had already been a staple of U.S. currency for decades, and its design, the Jefferson nickel, had remained largely unchanged since 1938. It had become a symbol of American coinage, with a portrait of Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, gracing the obverse, and an image of his home, Monticello, adorning the reverse. This familiar design had been in circulation for years and had become a mainstay in the wallets and pockets of Americans. However, the 1983 5-cent coin was far from ordinary. Like many coins of its era, it was part of a larger set of coins being minted as part of a vast, evolving U.S. coin production process. The mint was dealing with the rising costs of metal and was looking for ways to maintain the integrity and affordability of its coinage. Just like other coins in the mint's arsenal, the nickel was crafted with a combination of copper and nickel. But this seemingly straightforward creation had an intriguing story that went unnoticed for years. In 1983, the U.S. Mint produced billions of 5-cent coins, but amongst them, a rare anomaly emerged, one that would have numismatists and collectors buzzing for years to come. In what seemed like a small error, certain 1983 nickels were struck with a slight variation that would make them far more valuable than their face value. This variation, initially subtle and seemingly unimportant, would turn the 1983 nickel into a treasure sought by coin collectors, Thanks to a combination of rarity and historical intrigue. The core of this story is the coin's design. The Jefferson nickel, which had been in production for decades, had become an iconic symbol of American history. However, over the years, the design had undergone subtle changes to reflect new advances in coin production. The 1983 nickel was minted using traditional techniques, yet what made it particularly interesting was the fact that certain coins from that year were struck with a rare flaw, a flaw that would create a perfect storm for collectors. To understand how this error occurred, we need to take a step back and look at the way coins are produced. The minting process for each coin involves several important steps, from the creation of the coin's design to the striking of metal planchets, which are then pressed into coin dies to create the final product. This process requires a high degree of precision and control, but like any industrial production process, it is not immune to human error or machine malfunctions. In the case of the 1983 nickel, something went wrong during the minting process. The error wasn't immediately apparent, and it wasn't something that the casual observer would notice just by looking at a handful of nickels. However, the 1983 nickels with this mistake had an unusually distinct feature that would come to define their value. They were struck on the wrong planchet, a type of metal intended for a different coin. Normally, a nickel would be struck on a copper-nickel planchet, but some 1983 nickels were mistakenly struck on a copper-plated zinc planchet, which was intended for use with the penny. The difference in metal composition meant that these coins had a slightly different appearance and, more importantly, a different weight. These wrong planchet coins had a distinct shine and tone compared to their copper-nickel counterparts, and the shift in composition meant that they didn't wear the same way that other nickels did in circulation. But the real surprise came when coin collectors and enthusiasts began to realize what had happened. These 1983 nickels struck on the wrong planchet were incredibly rare, so rare, in fact, that only a small number of them were ever produced. And it was this rarity, coupled with the error, that made them so desirable in the world of numismatics. Over time, these coins became more and more valuable to collectors who were willing to pay a premium for a rare piece of American coinage. Now, the idea of rare coins is nothing new. Throughout history, errors in minting have sparked the interest of collectors, as coins with flaws are often seen as unique and worthy of special attention. From double-struck coins to coins with misaligned dies, errors have always been a key part of the numismatic world. But the 1983 nickel's flaw, the fact that it was struck on the wrong planchet, was particularly fascinating because of the materials involved. Copper-plated zinc was not only used for pennies at the time, but it was also a material that wasn't commonly seen on nickels. This added an element of mystery to the coin, making it a puzzle that collectors were eager to solve. The intrigue surrounding the 1983 wrong planchet nickels only grew as more were discovered in circulation, and as word spread about their rarity. For years, coin dealers, collectors, and numismatists searched high and low, scouring coin rolls and dealers' tables in search of one of these elusive coins. Each discovery became an event in the numismatic community, as the value of the 1983 nickel skyrocketed. As with many rare and valuable coins, the value of the 1983 wrong planchet nickel wasn't just tied to its physical rarity. It was also influenced by the growing interest from collectors. In the world of coin collecting, it's not just about the coin itself, but the story behind it. And the story of the 1983 nickel, its rare error, its historical context, and its journey from a mistake to a treasure, added to its allure and increased its value. So, what is the 1983 wrong planchet nickel worth today? The answer might surprise you. Thanks to its rarity and the growing demand among collectors, these 1983 nickels have become a sought-after piece of American numismatic history. Depending on their condition, some of these coins can fetch as much as $104,000 at auction. Yes, you heard that correctly, $104,000 for a coin that, just a few decades ago, was seen as an ordinary nickel. But as the story goes in the world of coin collecting, it's the rare, the unusual, and the historically significant that often holds the most value. And the 1983 wrong planchet nickel is a perfect example of how a seemingly simple coin can grow in value as time passes and as more collectors recognize its worth. The value of the 1983 nickel today stands as a testament to the fascinating world of coin collecting. It shows just how a small error in the minting process, a coin struck on the wrong planchet, can lead to a hidden gem of numismatic history. The coin's rise in value also reflects the passion of collectors who, for years, have dedicated themselves to uncovering rare pieces of history and understanding the intricate details of American currency. So, the next time you find yourself with a handful of nickels, take a moment to appreciate that not all of them are just simple coins. Some, like the 1983 wrong planchet nickel, have a story to tell. A story that turns an ordinary piece of change into a valuable and sought-after collector's item. The 1983 nickel has, in a way, become a symbol of the unexpected treasures that can emerge from seemingly ordinary things, and it serves as a reminder that in the world of numismatics, anything is possible. For collectors, the 1983 wrong planchet nickel represents more than just a coin. It's a piece of history, a symbol of how the smallest of errors can create something valuable and extraordinary. And for anyone lucky enough to own one, it's a treasure worth holding on to, as the value continues to climb higher, making this simple 5-cent coin far more than what it appears to be at first glance, as the numismatic world continues to evolve. One thing is for sure. The 1983 wrong planchet nickel will remain one of the most fascinating and valuable coins in American coinage history. With a value that continues to soar and a story that captivates both novice and experienced collectors alike, it's no wonder that this humble coin has earned its place in the annals of numismatic legend. It's the early 90s, a time when the world is shifting and the pace of change is palpable. The digital age is beginning to take root, and America finds itself in the midst of rapid technological progress, cultural shifts, and global transitions. Yet, amidst all the exciting changes, a simple, everyday object, the 5-cent coin, remains a constant part of American life. But little did people know the 1994 5-cent coin or nickel would eventually become a prized possession in the world of numismatics. A coin that was born amidst the changes of the 1990s, yet would come to symbolize something far more significant in the grand scope of American history. The nickel has always been a modest yet steadfast companion. It's a coin that's circulated through the pockets of millions of Americans over the years, seemingly an ordinary part of daily life. The Jefferson nickel, in particular, had been in continuous production since 1938. Featuring a portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and an image of his home, Monticello, on the reverse. This design had become an iconic representation of American history and tradition. But as the years rolled on, the world of coinage was evolving, and with it, so too was the very nature of the coins themselves. By 1994, the United States Mint was well into a new era of coin production. With new technologies and shifts in economic demands, the Mint was exploring ways to modernize its coinage, all while maintaining the tried-and-true designs that the American public had come to recognize. At the same time, the country was navigating a changing economic landscape, and the Mint was facing new pressures. The rising costs of materials, particularly metals, forced the Mint to look for more efficient ways to create coins, which led to several shifts in the way coins were produced. The 5-cent coin, however, remained a staple of American currency. It had long been tied to daily transactions, from buying a candy bar at the store to making small change for a coffee. The 1994 nickel, like many other coins of its time, was produced using a mix of copper and nickel, creating a unique look and feel. But while the basic design remained consistent with earlier versions of the coin, something noteworthy was happening behind the scenes. The world of coin collecting was quietly evolving, and in a few short years, the 1994 nickel would become something much more valuable than its face value. The design of the 1994 5-cent coin, like its predecessors, still featured the image of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse. This design, created by artist Felix Schlag, had been in circulation for over half a century by the time the 1994 version was minted. The image of Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, continued to adorn the reverse side of the coin, representing Jefferson's legacy and his importance in American history. Over time, this design had become synonymous with American identity, and it was an enduring symbol that millions of Americans knew well. However, there was something special about the 1994 nickel that would set it apart from its predecessors. To understand the significance of the 1994 nickel, we must take a closer look at the production process. The process of minting a coin involves striking a blank metal planchet, which is then pressed into a die that imprints the design onto the coin. This process requires immense precision and care. Yet, as with any large-scale manufacturing process, it's not immune to imperfections. One particular issue that arose in 1994 was related to the production of the nickel. Some of the coins struck that year were produced with a slight flaw, an error that would go largely unnoticed at the time. This error would prove to be key in the coin's later value and its appeal to collectors. In 1994, a small number of nickels were struck with an unusual die alignment. This misalignment meant that the design was slightly off-center, creating a coin that was different from the standard, one that had a unique appearance. At first glance, this was a small issue, but it was enough to make the coin stand out in a world where slight imperfections can lead to rare and valuable treasures. This error, though subtle, would later come to define the 1994 5-cent coin. As is often the case with coin errors, it was the rarity of these mistakes that drew the attention of collectors. Coin collectors and numismatists have long had a fascination with coins that feature subtle errors, and these misaligned die nickels quickly became an object of desire for those in the know. The misalignment created a coin that was not only visually unique but also historically significant, as it represented a small flaw in an otherwise routine process. As news of these misaligned 1994 nickels spread through the coin collecting community, collectors began to seek them out. They scoured coin rolls, visited dealers, and attended numismatic conventions, all in search of this rare variation. What made these coins particularly intriguing was that, unlike other types of errors that were easy to spot, the misalignment on the 1994 nickel was subtle enough that it could easily go unnoticed by the casual observer. This made it a true treasure for collectors who had an eye for detail and an appreciation for the rarity of such coins. The 1994 misaligned die nickels quickly gained recognition in the numismatic world, and their value began to rise. For collectors, the appeal was not just about owning a piece of currency but about owning a piece of history, a coin that had been struck at a particular moment in time and that carried with it a unique story. The misaligned die error made the coin stand out in a way that few others could. It was a coin that, though part of a massive mintage, was one of a kind in its imperfection. As the years passed, the value of the 1994 misaligned die nickel continued to grow. What was once a relatively unnoticed error slowly gained recognition as one of the most valuable coins of its kind. By the time collectors started to fully understand the rarity of the 1994 misaligned die nickel, its value had increased exponentially. Coins that once circulated as part of the everyday change of American citizens were now being sold for thousands of dollars. Some of the highest-grade examples of the 1994 misaligned die nickel were fetching impressive prices at auction, with some reaching as high as $92,000. You might be wondering, how is it possible that a coin worth just 5 cents when it was minted could become worth so much? The answer lies in a combination of factors. First, the rarity of the misaligned die error made these coins highly sought after by collectors. Coins with errors, especially those as subtle as this one, have always commanded a premium in the numismatic market. Second, the historical context of the coin played a role in its increased value. The 1994 nickel represents a moment in time when the mint was still working to modernize its production methods while preserving traditional designs. And finally, the growing interest in rare coins, especially those with stories to tell, further drove the price of the 1994 misaligned die nickel. Today, the 1994 misaligned die nickel stands as one of the most valuable coins in American numismatics. Its rise in value over the past few decades is a testament to the lasting appeal of rare coins, and the way that small mistakes or imperfections can turn an ordinary object into something extraordinary. The 1994 nickel, once seen as just another piece of everyday currency, has now become a treasure that is worth far more than its original face value. And so, the story of the 1994 5-cent coin, its design, minting, and eventual value, reminds us that sometimes the most valuable things in life are not always the ones that seem important at first glance. A simple mistake, a small misalignment, and a little bit of luck have combined to create a coin that has captured the attention of collectors and numismatists alike. The 1994 misaligned die nickel stands as a perfect example of how the world of coin collecting is filled with unexpected treasures, waiting to be uncovered as we wrap up the story of the 1994 5-cent coin. One thing is clear. This unassuming nickel, once worth only 5 cents, has transformed into a rare and valuable piece of American numismatic history. With a value that now hovers around $92,000, it's proof that sometimes the most valuable things can come from the most humble of beginnings. So, the next time you come across a 1994 nickel, take a moment to examine it carefully. It might just hold a story, or even a small fortune waiting to be discovered.